"Please buy me and make me your wife," whispered the Apache Woma chained like a wild animal. She was born into a world shaped by wide skies and quiet strength. The land around her stretched far, filled with dry earth, moving wind, and mountains that seemed to watch over her people. From a young age, the Apache girl learned that life was not meant to be easy, but it was meant to be lived with pride. Her elders taught her that every step on the ground mattered, that the earth remembered those who respected it. She listened closely, not because she was forced to, but because she wanted to understand who she was and where she belonged. As a child, she followed her mother through daily tasks, learning patience and care. Her mother spoke gently but firmly, teaching her how to prepare food, how to gather plants, and how to listen to the land. These lessons were not rushed. They were shared slowly, with meaning behind every word. Her father taught her how to stay alert, how to observe without fear, and how to remain calm even when the world felt uncertain. He believed strength did not always mean loud action. Sometimes strength was quiet and steady. She grew into a young woman known for her sharp mind and thoughtful nature. Others noticed how she listened more than she spoke, how she watched people carefully before deciding what to say. She was not cold or distant, just careful. Life had taught her that words carried weight, and she chose hers wisely. Among her people, she was trusted. When she spoke, others paused to listen. The world around her, however, was changing. Stories traveled faster than the wind. Visitors from distant places had begun to appear, bringing unfamiliar customs and restless energy. Some came with trade and conversation, others with intentions that were harder to read. The elders spoke in low voices during gatherings, sharing concerns without spreading fear. The Apache people had faced challenges before, and they believed they could face them again. Still, something felt different this time. The young woman sensed the unease, even when no one spoke of it openly. She noticed how guards stayed alert longer than usual, how families stayed closer together. Nights felt quieter, heavier, as if the land itself was holding its breath. She did not panic, but she paid attention. Her father once told her that awareness was the first form of protection. Despite the tension, daily life continued. The community could not stop living simply because the future felt unclear. Children still laughed, elders still told stories, and the young woman still carried out her responsibilities. She helped care for the elderly, offering water and listening to their memories. These stories reminded her that her people had survived many storms, not by force alone, but by unity and wisdom. She often sat with her grandmother, whose voice carried both softness and authority. The old woman spoke of identity, reminding her granddaughter that no matter where life carried her, she must never forget who she was. "Your name is not just a sound," her grandmother would say. "It is your history, your spirit, and your promise to yourself." The young woman held those words close, even though she did not yet know how important they would become. As she grew older, she began to understand that being a woman in her community meant balance. She was expected to be gentle yet firm, caring yet strong. She did not see these traits as opposites. To her, they belonged together. She took pride in her role, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Her life had purpose, rooted deeply in her people's survival and dignity. There were moments of joy that still found their way into her days. Quiet laughter with friends, shared meals, and long walks where she felt free under the open sky. In those moments, she allowed herself to imagine a future shaped by choice rather than fear. She believed that life, though unpredictable, could still offer kindness. That belief made her hopeful, even when shadows appeared at the edges of her world. The elders continued to guide the community, urging caution but not panic. They reminded everyone that fear could weaken the spirit faster than any outside force. The young woman admired their calm. She learned from them that dignity was not something that could be taken easily. It lived inside a person, protected by memory and belief. She began helping teach younger girls, passing on what she had learned. She showed them how to stay observant, how to trust their instincts, and how to respect themselves. She wanted them to grow strong, not hardened. She believed kindness and awareness could exist together. Teaching them gave her a sense of responsibility that went beyond herself. Still, the distant world pressed closer. Travelers brought news of conflicts elsewhere, of people being treated unfairly, of traditions ignored or dismissed. These stories troubled her deeply. She wondered how anyone could forget that every person carried a story, a family, and a place they called home. She did not yet know that her own story was about to change in ways she could not imagine. One evening, as the sun lowered and painted the land in warm colors, she stood alone, watching the horizon. The air felt different, heavier than usual. She placed her hand on the ground, a habit she had learned as a child, and closed her eyes. She tried to steady her thoughts, reminding herself of everything she had been taught. No matter what came, she told herself, she would remember who she was. Her life up to that point had been shaped by belonging, identity, and quiet strength. She was not powerless, even if the future felt uncertain. She carried her people's history in her heart and their hopes in her actions. Whatever awaited her beyond that horizon, it would not erase the person she had become. She did not know that soon, her memories would be the one thing no one could take from her. The morning began like many others, quiet but alert. The air felt tense, even before the sun rose fully. The young Apache woman noticed it as soon as she opened her eyes. Birds were fewer, and the usual sounds of early movement were missing. People moved carefully, speaking in low voices. No one said anything directly, but everyone felt it. Something was wrong. She stayed close to her family, helping where she could. Her father scanned the distance often, his expression serious. Her mother kept the younger children near, holding them tighter than usual. The elders had warned that danger sometimes arrived without noise, and that day proved them right. The attack came suddenly. Confusion filled the air. Shouts echoed, not of anger, but of fear and urgency. The young woman tried to stay calm, remembering her father's lessons. She looked for her family, but the crowd separated quickly. Dust rose, and unfamiliar figures moved fast through the chaos. The world she knew broke apart in moments. She tried to run, but the ground was uneven and crowded. Hands grabbed her arms. She struggled not with panic but with determination. She did not cry out at first. She refused to give her fear a voice, but the strength against her was greater. She was pulled away, farther and farther from everything familiar. The journey that followed felt endless. Her hands were restrained, limiting her movement. She was forced to walk long distances under harsh conditions. Her body grew tired, but her mind worked constantly. She observed everything, the people around her, their habits, their moods. She knew that understanding her situation was the only way to survive it. Along the way, she saw others like her, silent, exhausted, and afraid. No one spoke much. Words felt useless in a situation where no one listened. Still, she remembered her grandmother's voice, reminding her that silence did not mean weakness. It could be a shield. When they reached their destination, she realized how completely her life had changed. The place was loud and unfamiliar. People looked at her not as a person, but as an object. Their eyes did not search for her thoughts or feelings. They measured her as if she were something to be owned. That was when the weight of her situation truly settled in her chest. She was given no name there. The name her parents had chosen, the one that carried her history, was ignored. She was referred to with careless words, stripped of identity. Each time it happened, she repeated her true name silently in her mind. She refused to let it disappear. Her days became a series of long hours filled with waiting. Waiting to be moved, waiting to be examined, waiting to be judged. She learned to remain still, to show little emotion. Drawing attention felt dangerous. She watched others who reacted strongly and saw how it worked against them. Survival, she realized, required control. The hardest part was not the physical discomfort, but the way people treated her. They spoke around her as if she could not understand. They laughed, pointed, and discussed her future without concern. She felt invisible and exposed at the same time. It was a strange and painful feeling. At night, when the noise faded, her thoughts grew louder. She remembered her home, the land, the stories. She held onto these memories tightly, replaying them again and again. They were her anchor. Without them, she feared she might lose herself entirely. She also noticed small details others ignored. Not everyone around her was the same. Some avoided looking at her. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. A few seemed cruel without reason. She learned to read expressions quickly. It became another form of protection. One day, she was brought into a crowded space where many people gathered. The atmosphere was heavy and tense. She understood without being told that this was a place where lives were decided quickly. She stood still, her posture straight, even though her body ached. She would not allow them to see her broken. People spoke loudly, discussing prices and value. Their words felt sharp, even when she did not fully understand them. She realized she was being judged not for who she was, but for what others thought she could be worth. It was humiliating, but she forced herself to remain calm. In that moment, she made a decision. She would not give in to despair. If this was a test of endurance, she would endure. She remembered the elders saying that the spirit could survive even when the body was trapped. That thought gave her strength. As the hours passed, fear crept in slowly. She did not know where she would be taken or what would happen next. The unknown pressed against her thoughts. Still, she kept her face steady. She had learned long ago that showing fear often invited more harm. She thought of her family constantly. She wondered if they were safe, if they were searching for her, or if they believed she was gone forever. That pain was deeper than any physical exhaustion, yet she turned it into resolve. If she survived, her story would continue. If she remembered them, they were still with her. The day ended with her being moved again, this time into a confined space. The walls were close, the air stale. She sat quietly, her back against the surface, her eyes closed. She slowed her breathing, grounding herself the way her mother had taught her. Panic would not help her now. In the darkness, she made herself a promise. No matter what happened, she would remain herself. They could control where she stood and where she walked, but they could not own her thoughts. She would observe, learn, and wait for a chance, any chance, to change her fate. This was no longer the life she had known, but it was still her life. And as long as she lived, hope had not completely left her. The day arrived slowly, but once it began, it moved with cruel speed. She sensed it before anyone spoke to her. The air felt crowded, heavy with voices and movement. She was guided forward with others, each step reminding her that she no longer decided where she went. Still, she walked with her head held steady. If this was another test, she would face it with the same quiet strength she had carried since childhood. The place was filled with people she did not know. Their voices blended together into a loud, restless sound. Some spoke quickly, others laughed, and a few watched in silence. She stood among strangers, yet she felt completely alone. Eyes moved over her, stopping and starting as if she were something to be inspected. She focused on breathing slowly, just as she had taught the younger girls back home. She understood now that this moment mattered more than the others. The way people spoke, the way they gestured, made it clear that choices were being made. Not by her, but about her. Her future was being discussed as if it were a simple matter. That realization sent a deep chill through her, but she did not let it show. As she stood there, she remembered her grandmother's words about dignity. Dignity, she realized, was not given by others. It was something she had to protect herself. So she straightened her back, lifted her chin slightly, and met the world in front of her without lowering her eyes. People stepped closer, then moved away. Some showed interest, others lost it quickly. Each time someone paused in front of her, she tried to read their face. She searched for signs, kindness, cruelty, indifference. Most faces revealed nothing she could trust. Still, she observed carefully. This was the only power she had left. Time stretched painfully, her legs ached, and her throat felt dry. She wondered how long she could stand like this. She reminded herself that her body might grow tired, but her mind must stay alert. Giving up now would mean losing everything she still had inside. Then she noticed him. He stood a little apart from the others. He was not loud, not impatient. He did not push forward or shout. His eyes moved slowly, taking in the scene with a serious expression. When his gaze reached her, it did not linger in the same way others had. There was no excitement in it, no careless interest. Instead, there was hesitation. She watched him closely. He seemed uncomfortable, as if being there weighed on him. When others laughed or spoke lightly, he did not join them. He listened, his face tense, his posture stiff. Something about him felt different, not gentle, but not careless either. She knew she could be wrong. She knew that hope could be dangerous. But she also knew that doing nothing would leave her at the mercy of chance. And chance, she had learned, was rarely kind. Her heart beat faster as she made a choice. It was not an easy one. It felt like stepping into deep water without knowing how cold it would be. But survival often demanded courage in unexpected forms. When the moment came, she acted quickly. As he stepped closer again, she leaned forward just enough for her voice to reach him, but not loud enough for others to hear. Her voice was low, steady despite the fear pressing against her chest. She spoke carefully, choosing simple words. She did not beg loudly. She did not cry. She simply spoke the truth of her situation as clearly as she could. She asked him to take her with him, to offer her safety instead of uncertainty. She framed it not as a dream, but as a way to survive what lay ahead. The words left her mouth like a fragile offering. Once spoken, they could not be taken back. For a moment, she feared she had made a terrible mistake. She feared his reaction, feared drawing attention, feared the consequences. He froze. For a long second, he did not respond at all. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed, as if he were trying to understand what he had just heard. He looked around quickly, checking if anyone else had noticed. Then his gaze returned to her face. She did not look away. In that brief exchange, something passed between them. Not trust, not kindness, but awareness. He saw, perhaps for the first time, the reality of the situation in front of him. Not an object, not a transaction, but a person making a desperate choice. He stepped back without speaking. Her heart sank. She told herself she had done what she could. Whatever happened next, she would face it. She would not regret trying. Time moved forward again. Voices rose and fell. Names were called. Decisions were made. She stood still, her body tense, her mind racing. Every sound felt louder than before. Then she heard movement near her again. He had returned. This time his expression was different. The hesitation remained, but now it was joined by something else, conflict. He spoke briefly to others nearby. His voice was controlled, but his jaw tightened as he listened to their replies. She did not know what was being said, but she sensed that he was struggling with the choice in front of him. She waited. Waiting had become her skill. Eventually, it was over. She was guided away, her direction changed. She did not know yet what the outcome was, only that something had shifted. The uncertainty was still there, but it felt different now, less like falling, more like standing at the edge of something unknown. As she was led aside, her thoughts raced. Had her words helped her or hurt her? Had she chosen the lesser danger or simply a different one? There were no answers yet. She caught one last glimpse of him before they moved her out of sight. He did not look relieved. If anything, he looked burdened. That image stayed with her. Later, when she was alone again, she replayed the moment in her mind. She analyzed every word, every pause. She wondered if she had spoken too softly or too boldly. She wondered if she should have said more or less. But deep down, she knew something important had happened. For the first time since her capture, she had acted instead of only reacting. She had used her voice, however quietly. That alone felt like reclaiming a small piece of herself. That night, she did not sleep easily. Her future was still uncertain, still fragile. But there was a thin thread of possibility now, stretching into the darkness. She held on to it carefully, afraid it might break if she pulled too hard. Whatever awaited her next, she knew one thing for certain. She was still fighting. The next days passed in a strange blur. She was moved away from the crowded place and taken along a long, dusty path. Her steps were slow, not only from tiredness, but from the weight of uncertainty pressing on her thoughts. She did not know where she was going or what kind of life waited ahead. All she knew was that everything familiar was now far behind her. The man who had taken responsibility for her walked ahead most of the time. He did not speak much. When he did, his words were short and careful. He did not raise his voice or act harshly, but that alone did not bring comfort. Silence, she had learned, could mean many things. She stayed alert, watching his movements, listening to the tone of his voice, noticing how he behaved when others were around. They traveled for days. The land changed slowly as they moved forward. Hills gave way to flatter ground, and the air felt different. Each night she sat quietly, keeping her thoughts to herself. She did not ask questions. She knew better than to reveal her fears too soon. Trust, if it ever came, would have to grow slowly. He gave her food and water regularly. The meals were simple, but they were enough. She noticed that he never rushed her or spoke down to her. Still, she remained cautious. Kindness in small actions did not erase the truth of how they had met. She reminded herself often that survival depended on awareness, not hope alone. When they finally reached his home, she took in her surroundings carefully. The place was modest, not grand or crowded. It felt quiet, almost lonely. There were no signs of celebration or pride, only routine. That, in some way, unsettled her more than noise would have. She wondered what kind of man lived such a life. Inside, everything was plain. Tools were placed neatly, and the space was kept clean but without decoration. It looked like a home built for function, not comfort. She was shown a small area where she could rest. The door was not locked, but she did not mistake that for freedom. She understood that the world beyond those walls was still unfamiliar and dangerous. The first weeks were the hardest. Every sound startled her. Every change in routine made her tense. She spoke little, answering only when necessary. She watched how he treated others when they visited, how he spoke to them, how they responded to him. Slowly, she began to understand his place in the world around him. He was not powerful, but he was respected. Not feared, but not ignored either. People listened when he spoke. They seemed to trust his judgment. That confused her. She struggled to understand how someone who took part in her situation could also be seen as honorable by others. He noticed her silence but did not force conversation. Instead, he spoke in calm tones, explaining tasks, offering choices when possible. He never demanded gratitude. That made her uneasy in a different way. She had prepared herself for cruelty or control. This quiet distance left her unsure of how to protect herself. Over time, she began helping with daily work. She did so carefully, watching for signs of hidden intention. But as days turned into weeks, she noticed that he respected boundaries she expected him to cross. He did not invade her space or treat her like an object. Still, she did not let her guard down. At night, alone with her thoughts, she questioned everything. Was this a pause before something worse? Was she being given comfort only to make her weaker later? Her past had taught her that safety could disappear quickly. She slept lightly, always ready to wake. He, too, seemed changed. She noticed how often he sat in silence, staring at nothing. Sometimes he looked at her as if he wanted to say something, then stopped himself. When he spoke, his words carried weight, as though he chose them carefully. It became clear that her presence had affected him in ways he had not expected. One evening, he finally spoke more openly. He did not apologize, but he did not defend himself either. He spoke of responsibility, of choices made too quickly, and of consequences that stayed longer than expected. She listened without interrupting. She did not offer forgiveness. She did not accuse him. She simply listened. That moment changed something between them. Not trust, but understanding. She realized that he, too, was carrying a burden. That did not erase her pain, but it added complexity to a world she had begun to see only in harsh lines. She began to reclaim small pieces of herself. She practiced quiet rituals from her past, simple habits that grounded her. She repeated her name silently each night before sleeping. She reminded herself of her family, her land, and the strength passed down to her. No matter where she was, those things still lived inside her. As months passed, she grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. She learned the rhythms of this new place, the patterns of people, the unspoken rules. Knowledge gave her confidence. She was no longer simply waiting. She was preparing, though she did not yet know for what. The man noticed the change in her. He treated her less like someone fragile and more like someone capable. He asked her opinions, listened to her thoughts. This shift unsettled her at first. Being seen again reminded her of who she used to be. It hurt, but it also healed. Still, the balance between them remained delicate. The past stood between them like an unspoken wall. She did not forget how their paths had crossed. She did not forget the fear that had brought her there. Respect, she knew, did not erase history, yet something important was happening. She was no longer only surviving. She was learning how to exist in a changed world without losing herself. Each day she chose patience over anger, observation over reaction. These choices were hers, and they mattered. She began to understand that survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about protecting one's spirit from being broken. In that sense, she was winning a battle no one else could see. As she stood one evening watching the sun lower over unfamiliar land, she felt both grief and strength fill her chest. She missed her past deeply, but she also knew she had endured what many could not. Whatever the future held, she would meet it on her own terms. She had not surrendered. She had adapted. Time moved forward quietly, not in sudden changes, but in small, meaningful steps. The woman no longer counted days the way she once had. Instead, she marked time by growth, by how steady her hands felt, by how calm her thoughts became, by how often she could breathe without fear tightening her chest. The world around her was still unfamiliar, but it no longer felt completely hostile. She had learned something important during her long journey. Survival was not only about enduring pain, but about choosing how to live afterward. She could not change what had happened to her, but she could decide what kind of person she would be because of it. That choice gave her strength. The man who shared her space had changed as well. He no longer kept distance out of uncertainty alone. He listened more, spoke less, and showed respect through his actions. He began to understand that real responsibility did not come from ownership or control, but from recognizing another person's humanity. This understanding did not come easily to him, and it did not erase the past, but it shaped the present in quieter, better ways. They spoke more openly now, not about everything, but enough. Sometimes they talked about daily matters, sometimes about the land, sometimes about silence itself. He asked about her traditions without demanding explanations. When she chose to share, she did so carefully, revealing pieces of her world as she felt ready. Each shared word felt like placing a stone on steady ground. She did not forget her people. She carried them with her in memory and practice. She honored them by living with purpose, by staying true to the values she had been taught. She found ways to help others around her, offering guidance, patience, and understanding. In doing so, she reminded herself that she was still capable of giving, not just surviving. There came a moment when she realized she no longer felt trapped in her thoughts. Fear no longer guided every decision. It still existed, but it no longer ruled her. She had learned to face it, to acknowledge it without surrendering to it. That realization felt like a quiet victory. One day, the man spoke of choice. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if every word mattered. He told her that she was not bound by him, not in spirit or intention. He explained that she could decide her future, even if the path was difficult. His words did not erase the past, but they opened a door she had not allowed herself to see. She listened without reacting right away. She had learned not to rush decisions shaped by emotion. That night she thought deeply. She considered the risks of leaving, the unknowns of staying, and the strength she had gained along the way. She realized that freedom was not only about movement. It was also about dignity, respect, and choice. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. She explained that her life would move forward, but not as a result of pressure or fear. She would decide each step carefully. Whether she stayed or left, she would do so as herself, not as someone broken, not as someone owned, but as someone whole. In the days that followed, she prepared quietly, not in secret, but with intention. She gathered knowledge, learned roots, understood the world beyond the place she stood. Preparation gave her confidence. She was no longer reacting to circumstances. She was shaping them. The man respected her process. He did not rush her. He did not make promises he could not keep. That restraint mattered more than grand words ever could. It showed that he had learned something too, that real change came through humility, not control. When the time came, she stood at a crossroads, both real and symbolic. She looked back not with bitterness, but with understanding. She looked forward not with fear, but with awareness. Her past would always be part of her story, but it would not define her ending. She chose her path. It was not easy. It required courage, patience, and trust in herself. But she had faced worse and survived. She stepped forward carrying lessons learned through hardship and strength earned through endurance. As she moved on, she reflected on everything she had lost and everything she had found. She had lost certainty, comfort, and innocence, but she had found resilience, clarity, and a deeper understanding of herself. She had learned that identity could be tested but not erased, that dignity could bend but not break. Her story did not end with revenge or perfect resolution. It ended with continuation, with life moving forward, with a woman who had been pushed to the edge and chosen not to disappear. Somewhere beyond the horizon, new challenges waited, but she no longer feared them. She knew how to observe, how to adapt, and how to protect her spirit. She had learned that strength could be quiet and still powerful. She carried her name with her, spoken and unspoken. She carried the voices of those who had guided her. And she carried the truth that survival was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something earned. Her life would be remembered not for what was taken from her, but for what she refused to lose.